Okay, so you got me. My title was a little clickbaitish, but it wasn't really clickbait. It was illustrating what you're about to see. Kyiv loses 66,000 people in the past 3 months and fails to achieve his goal, says Shogu. So this is an analog to what you saw in the title. There's not 66,000 lies. That was just to draw you in and make you go, 66,000 lies? What? But here, 66,000 people in the past 3 months failed to achieve their goals. There, so here, Ukrainian forces have lost more than 66,000 people and 7,600 units of weaponry since the start of the so-called counteroffensive, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu says. Now, he's clearly lying about that. There's clearly no possible way that that could have happened over such a short period of time, but he's going to say it. Now, I'm going to cover what he says, and then I'm going to show you what the ripple effect of that's going to be before we're done. So just stay with me for just a little bit. Okay? In no area did the armed forces of Ukraine achieve their goals. Trying to hide the failure of the offensive, Ukrainian militants attacked civilian facilities and passed these terrorist attacks off as military victories. So he's talking about drone attacks, attacks on the Kerch Bridge, attacks in Moscow, attacks on these 6 or 7 different places about 2 weeks ago where the just over the Estonian border and those kind of things. Those are terrorist attacks. I can't think of anything that the Ukrainians can do to Russia militarily that wouldn't be called a terrorist attack. They're always called a terrorist attack. The most tense situation has developed in the Zaporite area, where the enemy is committed into battle strategic reserve brigades. I'm not sure how much is committed, but nonetheless, down in Zaporizhia, that's where the attack is strongest. Now, he's going to pivot. So he's giving a speech and he's talking about the big gains. Okay, so the biggest gain was 66,000 people killed in Ukraine, or 66,000 soldiers in Ukraine killed since the counteroffensive started. Now, wrap this around your head, because you can only lie so long before you start to go, the math doesn't actually work. About 2 months ago is when you started seeing that surface figure, and this was about for the last 3 months. The figure surface of Doug McGregor and others talking about 400,000 Ukrainians killed. This is unsustainable, right? So now you're going to add 66,000, and let's take off a little bit because this was about 2 months ago. So let's say it's 450,000. At some point, they're going to be claiming that a million Ukrainian soldiers have been killed, and like, really? It's not going to be long. It might be before the end of the year that they start saying that kind of nonsense. But you can't sustain those kind of lies. It just doesn't work. So they're claiming 400,000. Doug McGregor was claiming 400,000 killed, where the Times, the New York Times, just a couple weeks ago came out with a figure from a U.S. official that was about 70,000 Ukrainian soldiers killed. Now they're claiming 66,000 in the last 3 months alone, where 2 weeks ago the total number was about 70,000. So this is how wildly outlandish, how out there in left field that this number is. Okay, so Shogu is giving this speech, and he's talking about how many killed. He's also talking about other things. In no area, we talked about that. Army 2023 conference results. So what was that? I read about it, but I didn't really talk about it because it was kind of a secondary issue compared to whatever else was going on, drone strikes or whatever. So the Army 2023 forum that was held in August once again proved that even the conditions of sanctions, it remained a relevant platform for countries ready to build equitable partnership relations in the military technical realm. So despite sanctions, some countries want to earn contracts to provide military goods to Russia. During the conference, 20 government contracts worth more than 400 billion rubles were signed. A year earlier, 36 contracts worth 525 billion rubles were signed. Okay, so it's not that bad. I mean, it's pretty similar, not too far behind. If you want to know what a billion, how much a ruble is to a dollar, just multiply by about 100, and that's a ballpark figure. Okay, the concurrent Moscow Conference in the International Security brought together 800 delegates from 76 countries, including 26 defense ministers. The conference affirmed Russia's high authority on the international stage. They're very concerned about Russia's authority on the international stage, their image on the international stage, and demonstrated the failure of the efforts by the collective West to isolate it. Well, no, it's still isolated. That's why you're only getting this amount of effect rather than what you otherwise would have been able to. And then finally, they turned their attention to education. Now, this one actually makes me more nervous than the other pieces. See, the 66,000 figure is an outright lie. There's no question to my mind that the 66,000 figure is a lie. Are the casualties in the thousands? Sure. Tens of thousands? Maybe even. Like, we're not exactly sure, but it was a very bad start to the counteroffensive in the first few weeks, and then Ukraine shifted gears, but it's hard fighting. So no doubt it's a much harder road for the Ukrainians now. But when we turn our attention to education, education scares me because it tells me about what the leaders are thinking about in the future. I'm looking at what leaders are doing or not doing in order to kind of project out into the future. So they're doing things like from 10th grade forward, mandatory military training in public schools, where they're learning about the use of rifles, and they're learning to they're learning a narrative in their history books, a revised narrative about how, there's Nazis in Kyiv and they had to go in there. They didn't want to, and they had to go cleanse the country of Nazis and militarism and nationalists and all these kind of things. That's the Russian package. They're grooming them. I mean, that's essentially what this is. They're grooming high schoolers for this. Look at this. The number of students and cadets at the military defense higher education institution has exceeded 60,000 people. Pre-college, 17,000. Enrollment in 2023 significantly exceeds that of last year. So they're working on preparing that next phase. Now, that tells me they're in it for the long haul, because if you thought that this was going to be over by Christmas, you wouldn't be worried about that kind of thing. And so that actually makes me somewhat nervous. Curricula has been revised to reflect the experience of the special military operation, and not just the experience, the narrative of the special military operation. Cadets are learning courses on the use of drones. Again, I'm telling you, they're in it for the long haul. Okay, but the 66,000 figure is, again, I apologize if you feel like I've been clickbaity. I wasn't like saying, look at me, I'm a Kardashian. Like, that would be real clickbait. Here, I was illustrating how that kind of thing is just so false. And here, it's so false, but the misery is that it gets picked up. So you take that first line out here, this 66,000 people in the past however months, and I pump that into Google. Ukrainian forces have lost more than 66,000 people since and 7,600 units of weaponry since the start of the so-called counteroffensive. That's all I plugged in. So we find the original article, the TASS article. Then we see it in Al Jazeera, which is generally a pretty level-headed, not for everything, right? But for Ukraine, they've been actually pretty reliable. In a call with Russian military leaders, Shoigu claimed that Ukraine had claimed that, right? And then it quotes the rest of that sentence. Okay, so they're saying this is what he's arguing, which is different. But then you go to OANA News, and you see Ukrainian troops have lost more than 66,000 military. And then you go to Sputnik Africa, and that is a Russian African news service. Ukrainian troops have lost more than 66,000. And then you go to Al Maydan English, and you go to, since the start of the counteroffensive, Ukrainian troops have lost more than around 66,000 military personnel and 7,600 weapons. And then you go to Bundle, and then you go to United News of India, and it's all the same. And then whatever this Arabic thing is, and it's the same thing. It's just outright repeated. So he's planted a seed of a lie that's going to grow into a forest, and he knows that that's what he's doing here. So that's the misery behind this. So when I said 66,000 lies, I might not be far off, because these lies are going to be told far and wide. Now, I was saying it as a teaching point to show you, to illustrate how deceptive they are, but it might actually be thousands and thousands and thousands of lies. All right, well, that's all that I have here. Thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you more than anything for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine. I'll be back tomorrow, and I hope you will be too.